to 100 patients a day. We saw 4,500 patients in 4 to 5 days.
There were long lines, I gather, ultimately.
We were door to door. I mean, we were packed, shoulder to shoulder, out in the waiting rooms, in the hall.
The hospitals were inundated. On day one, there was genuine panic.
We're going to be calling some names here.
But doctors soon realized that few of the people they were seeing were seriously hurt.
Everyone was in really pretty good shape.
Really?
Pretty good shape. Burning eyes, some had burning nose, burning mouth, a little bit of coughing.
It was clear fairly early on that this was not a major disaster.
The only 2 patients that I really saw that had any significant real impact of this spill were probably the first 2 patients that I saw. My estimate is probably 99.5% really didn't have anything medically serious.
99.5%.
Of the patients that I saw.
Dr. Kimberly Dwyer was on duty at the Richmond Health Center.
There were some people who were injured, but they were a tiny minority, and it was a needle in a haystack situation.
Okay, you need to go to the line. Thank you.
And that became our greatest fear, is how in this morass of humanity who are primarily coming in healthy, are we going to find the ones who are really sick and find them in time to get them help?
It was a real problem. For over 5 days, 20,000 people turned up at local hospitals. Fewer than 25 were kept overnight. The most important thing seemed to be a piece of paper, proof for their lawyers that they'd sought medical attention.
Some people were genuinely injured, but the magnitude of the disaster was tremendously inflated by the need of these lawyers to have their potential clients documented.
Lawyers. Personal injury lawyers and their agents had descended upon Richmond, urging people to sign retainers for a possible lawsuit against General Chemical. They even cruised hospital lines, hustling for business. They told their potential clients they must have that piece of paper. Did any of them discuss with you the issue of a potential lawsuit and the potential rewards?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Were any so bold to say, look, just give me the piece of paper?
There were people that were frightened.
Yeah.
No one just said, I wanted the paper, but clearly they let it know that that was why they were there. And one of my patients came up to me and said, you know, Doc, is your name on the list? And I said, excuse me? And he said, well, get your name on the list. He said it'd be good for $3,000 or $5,000.
And then there were people who had no symptoms at all, were nowhere near the spill, didn't even know where the spill had happened, but, you know, came to the door and said, is this where I come to get my check?
Scouts for the lawyers, known as cappers, camped out on Richmond street corners, openly recruiting. Things got so bad, the California Bar Association had to be called in to monitor the situation. Sandora Bex was living in Richmond at the time.
As an example, somebody stuck one in my face and said, sign, I'll give you $1,000. And I wanted to read it. Wait, he snatched it back. They wouldn't let me read it.
Who was this guy?
A lawyer's representative. They were actually in the community on soapboxes, sitting in cars, stopping people on the street.
And people were signing up and what, going to the hospital?
They were sending them, go hospital, go hospital. And, you know, sign this, go to hospital. It's like a Mardi Gras. It was unbelievable.
They was handing out papers with no professional heading, no attorney's names, no address, no phone numbers, and giving it to people, fill this out. This is for the spill. You're going to get some money.
Florence Randall experienced severe respiratory problems on the day of the spill. She was treated at a local hospital and released. When she returned home, she found that the cappers had parked themselves on her street corner. And these lawyers were using these for their desks.
Yes, their desks and their seat, they were using these. And also their cars. They were sitting out in their cars with their clients.
And apparently did not care whether or not there were injuries. Gail Vaughn was packing for a trip that morning. That morning of the spill, Gail, were you injured?
No.
How many people do you guess were seriously injured or injured in the spill?
Maybe a quarter of the ones who filed, if that many.
That suggests that an awful lot of people faked it.
Yeah?
People you know?
Yeah. I was one of them.
Gail Vaughn had left for Arizona by the evening of the spill. When she returned to Richmond over a month later, she was surprised to hear that not only had her entire neighborhood signed up with a lawyer, it wasn't too late for her to get in on the game.
They still had scouts going around looking for people who hadn't signed up yet.
Did they question you specifically about your injuries, your fears?
The only thing they questioned me about, period, was have I signed up yet? That was it.
Period.
The only question.
Isn't that, it's kind of hard to believe that, isn't it? A major lawsuit? The
North Richmond is Ripley's, believe it or not.
Believe it or not, knowing all that, but also knowing how vulnerable they were, General Chemical caved in and settled out of court. So how does it happen in the disaster that never was that 65,000 people collect $180 million for personal injury? And how come their 150 lawyers can successfully claim $50 million of that in legal fees in a court case that never happened? And why would General Chemical, given the absence of really serious injury, happily pay up?
Millions and millions of dollars in attorney's fees, years of litigation, annoyance, harassment, bad press, and the message is settle. And that's what intelligent business people are forced to do.
Larry Schoenbrun's a maverick lawyer who horns in on class action suits like this one, trying, would you believe, to get lawyers' fees reduced. He rarely succeeds. He did not in this case. Schoenbrun says the lawyers driving the suit were engaged in legal blackmail, knowing that local juries could force the company into bankruptcy if there was a trial. A settlement would mostly be covered by insurance.
The moment that cloud hit the atmosphere from a lawyer's perspective, there were people injured and money to be made. This case was not about trying to determine who was injured and to see what could be done to help them. This case was run by lawyers to cash in.
All the principal lawyers in this case were terrific lawyers that acted with the utmost responsibility.
Bill Bernstein was appointed by the court as principal lawyer in the class action against General Chemical.
The fact that you might have a few fringe people trying to take advantage of the situation is not central to what happened here. What the focus is how this company allowed 65,000 people to be put in harm's way. The story is the way they acted recklessly. There was nobody there that knew how to unload that rail car safely. They became impatient, they overheated it, they blew the rupture disc, and they blew sulfuric acid into a highly populated urban area.
What do you make of the scene in Richmond the day after and the subsequent days when the town was descended upon by lawyers and their agents?
Well, I think that's a pejorative way of describing what happened.
I gather it really was pretty gross behavior.
Well, why would people blame the lawyers? The reason that this incident happened was because of the reckless behavior of this company.
Don't you think when it does happen, but it isn't a disaster, we should look at these cases with a particular set of eyes, that not a great deal happened here?
A great deal did happen here, Morley. 20,000 pounds of sulfuric acid was poured into this community. This was a serious incident, and people that are affected by this incident deserve compensation for it.
In California, beyond injury, annoyance, disruption, and anxiety are worthy of compensation. Personal injury lawyers agree that had it gone to trial, they would have won big just for anxiety. People were scared and didn't know quite what to do. Would you agree?
Yes, those people did exist, but it is my opinion that the greatest fear that developed in this community was the fear that they weren't going to get money, that their neighbors were going to get money as a result of this, but they wouldn't.
Is it not a question of your own integrity to ensure that each of your clients has been injured?
It is a question of my integrity. I would be a fool to sign on clients that weren't injured.
Except that no one is actually knocking on a door and checking.
Every one of these persons filed a verified claim questionnaire indicating what their injuries were.
Even if they say, look, I just signed up because I knew there was some money going around.
They said under penalty of perjury that they were hurt. That's why they got a distribution. And we had very good checks and balances on this because the primary factor in the distribution schedule was the location.
If you were there, you're hurt, you got a right to sue. That's what you're saying.
Well, that's right. If someone throws acid on you, you're there.
And even if you say, I was hurt, and you know when you're hurt you weren't, it's not perjuring yourself because the lawyers say, if you were in the neighborhood, you were hurt, pal.
I don't know of any lawyer that said if you were in the
You
neighborhood. you were
just
hurt.
said it.
No, I just said if you were in a location where you were exposed to sulfuric acid, you were injured, you have a right to sue, you were doused with sulfuric acid. That's not something that people in America should have to put up with. That's not part of our day-to-day, everyday lives.
Agreed. And people watching this will say, amen. But they will also say amen to someone who says, and lawyers are being overpaid, and particularly when something approaching a tragedy occurs. They're in there trying to sign people up, not to benefit society, but to get that 33%.
The lawyers in this case that had the principal roles in this case acted honorably. They acted in the best interest of the people of that community. They did terrific work for that community.
If they cared so much about my community and the chemical spill victims, why haven't they been in there doing pro bono to clean it up before now? Why was money the reason they finally came? So they didn't do us a service. They didn't do us a service. They put a bad name on a community that's a good community.
You have to look at it from the point of if you live in North Richmond, you're being subjected to these chemicals daily, and I do mean daily.
What they're saying is there's an historic justification for this.
Yeah,
That whether there was a spill or not, you owe us and you're going to pay.
they should have been paying. They should still be paying. They should still be paying.
Gail Vaughn didn't get paid because her paperwork was not completed. But what about Sandora Becks?
I'd rather General Chemical come in and take our kids out of high school and take them in them plants and train them. Keep your money. Train our kids and give us jobs. We'll know what to do with it.
Sandora Becks lived in the neighborhood closest to the cloud, yet she did not sue. Quite simply, she says, because she was not hurt. Sandora, do you feel like a chump for not filing?
No, I don't feel like a chump. I'm very comfortable with me.
But it would have been so easy.
I still got to live with me.
There is an irony to this in that, oddly enough, everyone is quite content with the system. General Chemical is content because it doesn't face half of a lifetime of lawsuits. The lawyers who representing the class action are more than content with $50 million in fees. The people of Richmond, for the most part, are okay. They got something out of this.
The question is, who's paying for all this happiness? Okay? Who are the people that are paying to make all these people so happy? They're the people that are watching your television show.
Schoenbrun's point is that we all end up paying through higher insurance premiums. As for the 65,000 people who collected, each received on average $1,700.